Okay, so I'm on tiermaker.org. So let's rank these bad boys. Again, I love every single Star Wars movie on this list, so don't take this too seriously. This is just for fun. So in last place, I'm going to put Attack of the Clones. Is there any question to this? I mean, honestly. Now, as I said before, I love every single Star Wars movie on this list, including this one, but I still have problems with it. While some say that The Phantom Menace is worse than this one, and I can understand why, but for me, I consider this the weakest one of them all. But once again, still a fun movie to watch. Let's go through the problems I have with it first. The first problem I have with it is the CGI in it. The CGI here is a problem. It looks unfinished, as if the producers forgot to make it look like we're not watching an unfinished work print. The CGI on Yoda looks good, but in terms of explosions and action sequences, it looks pretty bad. Some examples of that is the Coruscant chase scene at the beginning where Obi-Wan and Anakin are looking for Zam Wesell. The TVs in that bar show a bunch of random stuff on the screen, and they look like we're watching a bunch of classic video games. However, it's not terrible, and there are worse movies out there that have worse CGI effects, so I'm going to stop here. Another problem I have with Attack of the Clones is that we never really get a proper introduction to Master Sifo Dyas. When Obi-Wan's on Kamino tracking down Jango Fett, he's told that Sifo Dyas is the one who organized the clone army, but we never learn exactly who this character is. Now, if it had been Qui-Gon Jinn who had organized the army, that would have been more interesting and something that we don't need to ask questions about. Another example of that is Captain Typho. Sure, he didn't contribute a whole lot to the plot of this movie, but from what I understand, he's the nephew of Captain Panaka from The Phantom Menace. I didn't care much for Panaka's character, but I feel like he had a lot of character development in Phantom Menace, but then he's out of existence in the next two films, and then we never see him again, which was sad. And the last problem I have with Attack of the Clones is the pacing. Every 15 to 20 minutes of the movie, not a lot of stuff happens until we actually get into the Battle of Geonosis, where the majority of the action takes place. A perfect example of that is the Geonosis battle arena, where Anakin and Obi-Wan, it's just too long of a battle, if you ask me. Fighting Count Dooku, chasing him down, and then the battle arena, it does not need to be that long, George Lucas. Come on. So, yeah. Another thing is some aspects of the dialogue, which is actually a nitpick, if you ask me. I can't list all of them, but right before Anakin leaves to find his mother, Shmi Skywalker, he tells Padme he won't be gone long, but he's actually gone for almost a full day before he returns to Shmi's corpse. So, yeah, Anakin kind of lied to Padme. So, yes. Now let's talk about some positives. Despite it being at the end of the list, I still enjoy it, as I've said before. Let's talk about the Jango and Boba Fett dynamic first. I love the fact that we get a backstory with Boba Fett, where he originated from and how he is the way he is, which all came from his father, Jango Fett. Unlike Sifo Dyas and Typho, we actually get a story with Jango Fett and how he built the clone army and how he became the legacy of the Fett history, how we all know and love. I also love that Count Dooku was Qui-Gon Jinn's former Jedi Master. How interesting was that? I also love the fact that Mace Windu gets handled more well in this movie, and I think Samuel L. Jackson gives a great performance as the character. We get to see what he's truly like, he never smiles, and his purple lightsaber never gets too old to look at. He is the only Star Wars character to have that, as far as I'm aware of, and it's pretty badass. I feel like in terms of Star Wars in general, this was where he was handled the best. As for the romantic scenes with Anakin and Padme, I am perfectly fine with them, as it shows the relationship between them growing and how the Skywalker legacy started. So I believe if you hate these romantic scenes, you should look back and carefully think about it again. I also think that every actor in this movie did a great job with their roles, including, and I do mean it when I say including Hayden Christensen as Anakin Skywalker. I will most certainly defend him in this one, as well as Revenge of the Sith. And for those who hate his performance, prepare to suffer and deal with him again, since he is returning as Darth Vader in the upcoming Obi-Wan Kenobi series. Okay, I have no idea. I'm assuming James Earl Jones will come back to reprise his role as Darth Vader, but I feel like it'll just be Christensen in the costume, and that's about it. Also, when it comes to Shmi Skywalker's death, that shows that Anakin is letting his anger control him and have the dark side get into his mind. Also, people keep asking why Jango Fett's head doesn't fall out of his helmet when Boba Fett picks it up. It's simple. When Mace Windu chops his head off, the head flies out before it lands. So yes, to me, Attack of the Clones is the worst Star Wars film out there, but it's still definitely fun to watch and is one of the best films of all time. Next up, I've put Solo. Now, Solo for me loses my attention in some parts, which causes it to make me consider it the worst of all the Disney Star Wars films. My first problem with it is Kira. I do not care for Kira. I don't hate her, but I feel like her character wasn't explored as much. I think Amelia Clark gives me a good performance, don't get me wrong. She's entertaining enough. But my problem with her is that her relationship with Han is not explored that well. We just see her with Han on Corellia, and then we never learn about how they first meet. And then at the end, when she leaves for Dathomir, they never say goodbye, and we never see her again. Unless they make a sequel to Solo. Anyway, another negative of Solo is only a nitpick, and it's the scene where he first meets Chewbacca. It's cool that they met in an execution pit, but my question is, how the hell did Chewbacca manage to get to the pit? I mean, yeah, we learned that he was enslaved like all the other Wookiees, but other than that, we don't know. And that's not right. But those are my only criticisms of this film. Everything else in the movie is excellent. I absolutely love Alden Ehrenreich's performance as a young Han Solo. He gives it his all, and it's impressive that he pulled it off after recent acting lessons. I also love the fact that Darth Maul made a cameo at the very end. I love the fight between Solo and Dragon Voss at the end. I will also defend L337. People call her a budget K2SO, but I see her as a character that just came out of the blue. She is the most hilarious thing in this movie. I love her attitude in this movie, and I love Phoebe Waller-Bridge's performance as the character. But my favorite aspect of Solo is the fact we learn how Han Solo got his ever so famous Millennium Falcon. So yeah, Solo is flawed as well, but not as much as Attack of the Clones. Okay, just ahead of Solo is The Rise of Skywalker. Now, I know that a lot of people would have put this at dead last, but for me, I've put this in ninth place because I really enjoy the concept and story here. But first, let's talk about the negatives I have with it, because apparently everyone seems to hate this movie, and I can understand why. My biggest problem with this movie is the fact that there is a whole lot to show, and not a whole lot of it is explained. J.J. Abrams, this is the last installment of the saga. You need to stop putting in mysterious questions if you are coming to a finale here. I think everyone's biggest question is, how the hell is Emperor Palpatine still alive, and how did he get to Exegol? That's not even explained here, unless you read this certain novel that says he returned with a cloning device, and that still is not explained. The biggest question of the movie, and it's not even answered. Now let's talk about another problem I have with it. In a scene where Finn and Rey are sinking in quicksand, Finn yells out to Rey, then he needs to tell her something, but then he sinks and we never learn what he's going to say? What the crap? Apparently, according to an interview with JJ, Finn was going to tell Rey that he felt the Force, and that's kind of hinted when Rey killed herself. But other than that, we never learn, and that's not right. Next up are Rey's parents. Apparently, the father is Palpatine's son, and that leads to my next question. Did the Emperor marry, or did he clone them? And my last question is, when did General Hux become the good guy? We learned that he's the spy for the Resistance, but other than that, we don't know why, and that is also not right. Also, let's give Rose Tico a little bit of respect. I hate the fact that they cut down her role so much, because she had so much potential, but instead, it was all wasted thanks to the hate she got in The Last Jedi. Okay, now let's get into the positives of The Rise of Skywalker. I really like Princess Leia in this movie. Realizing that giving up her own life to have her son turn back to the light side, I'd buy it. Her role in this movie really works, and I think the stock footage they had for Carrie Fisher really works here. May she rest in peace. Also, I absolutely love Rey and Kylo Ren in this movie. After Rey goes into hiding, a vision of Han Solo goes into Kylo Ren's head, realizing that he feels really bad for killing his father, and turning back into Ben Solo. They team up, fight Emperor Palpatine alone, and they are my favorite parts of this entire trilogy. And I absolutely love all the Jedi cameos in that scene. Who doesn't love that? I absolutely love the Finn and Janna dynamic in this film as well. The fact that they're both stormtroopers who defected the First Order, they have a good, stable relationship. Furthermore, I'd like to talk about Emperor Palpatine. He is the best thing in this movie by a long shot. He is the conclusion to Rey's adventure. Yes, him returning made absolutely no sense whatsoever, but he is very intimidating here. Him trying to get Rey to kill him so she can become Empress. I really enjoy the Emperor in this movie, and I think Ian McDiarmid was at his best here. By the way, it was great to see Chewbacca finally get his medal after A New Hope. Lastly, who doesn't love Babu Frick? So yeah, this is the black sheep of the sequel trilogy, but still great nonetheless. Okay, so in 8th place, Revenge of the Sith. Okay, I know some people would have put this at the top of their list in terms of the prequel trilogy, but for me, I have a few small problems with this one, so let's get them out of the way. The first problem is Count Dooku. It has nothing to do with Christopher Lee's performance as the character. He is super entertaining here. But the problem with him in this movie is that he dies at the beginning after Anakin chopped his hands off. If you ask me, he died too early in the movie. I think he should have been seen at least until we're halfway through this thing. However, there is one positive scene with his death. It would be Palpatine's infamous line, "Do it!" where he orders Anakin to execute Dooku. That line always cracks me and my cousins up, and I'm pretty sure it cracks you up as well. Anyway, another con with Revenge of the Sith is General Grievous. Again, his character is amazing, and Matthew Wood gives a great vocal performance. But again, he wasn't seen a whole lot. He was killed halfway through the movie by Obi-Wan. So overall, I think Dooku and Grievous were used well in this film. I just wish we had more scenes featuring them. Also, how did Shaak Ti really die? Did Grievous execute her, or was she killed in the actual purge? All the other Jedi had only one way to die in the movie, but for Shaak Ti, her death is extremely confusing. Another problem is some aspects of the dialogue. Why does Obi-Wan tell Grievous he will not escape at the beginning of the movie when he does? Why does Yoda say he has good relations with the Wookiees instead of relationships? Why does he tell Anakin that attachment will lead to jealousy when that makes absolutely no sense? When Mace Windu is fighting Emperor Palpatine, Palpatine convinces Anakin that he can be able to help him save the one he loves, aka Padme, and then Windu tells him not to listen. Is he aware that Anakin and Padme are married and promises not to tell anyone else? So the dialogue is a little bit of a mess with this film. Okay, now let's talk about the positives. For one, I absolutely love the action sequences here, my personal favorite being Obi-Wan versus General Grievous. In my opinion, the most underrated Star Wars scene ever. I will never understand why this scene doesn't get a whole lot of attention. It has my favorite General Grievous quote of all time, "Army or not, you must realize you are doomed." Why is no one obsessed with this line, honestly? They are obsessed with, "It's over, Anakin. I have the high ground." But not this one? Come on! It's such a threatening line. This scene will always remain my favorite part of Revenge of the Sith. I also love the fact that we learn that Chancellor Palpatine is the Sith Lord trying to get Anakin to the dark side, and he succeeds. I love Emperor Palpatine in this film. Ian McDiarmid is just kick-ass here, and you can tell he has fun every time he plays this role. And of course, we cannot talk about Revenge of the Sith without talking about the Obi-Wan versus Anakin fight. This shows Anakin is now fully turned to the dark side and that he's willing to do whatever it takes to please the Emperor, even if it means killing his old master. And Obi-Wan having the high ground never gets old. If I had one more thing to say about Revenge of the Sith, it would have to be Order 66. It is the most intimidating scene in the film. It really shows how evil Palpatine is, and if that's what it takes to turn Anakin into Darth Vader, I'm willing to witness it take place. And I believe every single actor did great with their roles. Ian McDiarmid, Ewan McGregor, Frank Oz, Samuel L. Jackson, Natalie Portman, and Hayden Christensen. They are great here, and yes, once again, I will defend Hayden Christensen as Anakin Skywalker in this movie as well. Come on, give the man some respect. So Revenge of the Sith may be the major vote in terms here of the best Star Wars prequel film, but for me, I consider this the second best of the prequels, but still a great movie nonetheless. Let's move on to the number 7 spot. Okay, so the number 7 spot goes to The Phantom Menace. Now, this is very controversial. Again, do you remember in my childhood episode where I said that I agree with everyone that's boring and probably the worst Star Wars film of all time? Well, my opinion changed on it, and this is actually my favorite of the prequel trilogy, the standout film from it. Please don't move me from your channels. Now, before I get into my personal thoughts about it, let me just say something. I think George Lucas is a little full of himself. From what I have gathered from different resources, he said that his favorite Star Wars movie was this one, and this is a movie that he both wrote and directed. He also said that Jar Jar Binks was his favorite character in the franchise, and that's a character that he created, but that does not stop me from enjoying this movie. Speaking of Jar Jar, I know everybody hates this character and considers him one of the worst movie characters ever made, but for me, I honestly don't hate him. Is he a great character? No, not really, but there are many worse TV characters than him in my book. As for the trade route talk, I am perfectly fine with that. I know a lot of people say that this ruins the movie for them and that it was a terrible idea made by George Lucas and that it shouldn't belong in a Star Wars film. But for me, I don't bother it because it's politics that rule the world. Well, besides science, obviously. Now for Jake Lloyd as Anakin Skywalker, young Anakin Skywalker. Some people think that he was not great as Anakin, but I think you should also know that this was his first big role after Jingle All the Way. So there must have been a lot going on through his head. I also love the fact that we learn about the origins of C-3PO and how Anakin was his creator. Now we just need to learn about the origins of R2-D2, and we're good. Oh, and by the way, R2-D2 is my favorite Star Wars character, so that's mainly the reason why I want a movie dedicated to him. Now the pod race. I know a lot of people don't like that scene either, but for me, I can't help but enjoy it since I love races in movies. Some say it's too long of a scene, but I feel like it's just right in terms of its pacing. Okay, now let's talk about the biggest positive of this movie. Darth Maul. He is the best character in this movie without a doubt. Every time I ask a friend or teacher who their favorite Star Wars villain is, they usually say Darth Maul. He, however, is not my favorite villain. As much as I love him in this franchise, there is someone who will be better than him in my opinion. And no, it's not Darth Vader or Kylo Ren. Anyway, Darth Maul is used well in this film. However, my only criticism with this character is that he wasn't given a lot of dialogue. He's kind of like Oddjob from the James Bond movie Goldfinger. Oddjob has no dialogue whatsoever. All he does is just throw a hat that kills people. Darth Maul has dialogue, but only has 2 to 3 lines. But other than that, Darth Maul is a great character, especially for his red and black demon look and double-bladed lightsaber. And that's it. That's my only criticism of this movie. I cannot recommend The Phantom Menace enough. Go and watch it now. Next up, we have Rogue One, a Star Wars story. Now, this was a movie that I wasn't really obsessed with when it first came out back in 2016, but I remember everyone calling it a masterpiece, and nowadays on this list, this is the first movie on this list that I would actually consider a true masterpiece. I absolutely love Jyn Erso's story here and how she helped the Rebel Alliance get the Death Star plans, and Felicity Jones gives a great performance. With her skills, I could watch movies with her every day if I had the capability of doing so. Now, people criticize all the other characters saying, oh, they weren't explored as much. Well, that's because they're not the main characters. Jyn is. Supporting characters are not supposed to be explored that much. Their purpose here is to support the main character in the story. It's fine if you don't agree with me, but understand what I'm saying. Also, in A New Hope, one flaw about it was that we never learned how the Death Star got its exhaust port. But here, thanks to Rogue One, we now know how it got its weakness, thanks to Galen Erso. Now let's talk about K2SO. He is my favorite character in this entire movie. He has the best dialogue with lines such as, why does she get a blaster and I don't? And, did you know that wasn't me? Oh, Alan Tudyk. Such a great and terrific actor. And of course, Rogue One cannot be talked about without mentioning the best scene throughout the entire movie, and that is the Darth Vader hallway scene at the very end. Sorry, Luke, I am your father. You are not the most intimidating scene in all of Darth Vader lore. The hallway scene is. This scene gives me chills every time I watch it, and it's the first thing that pops into my head when I think about Rogue One. And I think to myself, oh my god, he was capable of doing that in less than 30 seconds? Well, of course he can. He's Darth Vader. Who else do you expect to do that? But this movie has one small problem, and that would have to be Admiral Raddus. He's just a ripoff of Admiral Akbar. What else can I say? But other than that, yeah, I cannot recommend Rogue One enough. So go and watch this if you come across it on Disney+. Okay, now for the number 5 spot, I'm going to put The Force Awakens. Now, this is the movie that got me into Star Wars. However, people do have a point when they say that the story was too similar to A New Hope, and this is true. But we all have a movie that made us loyal Star Wars fans, and The Force Awakens, for me, is that movie. I remember back in 2014 when the first teaser dropped, my parents were going to want to see it the following year, so we went and saw it opening night in 2015. I was 11 years old when this thing came out, and I did not know what to expect, but when we left the theater, I had a smile on my face for the rest of that night. I ended up watching the other 6 movies to become more of a fan, and then when this film came out at stores, I watched it over and over again. I'm pretty sure that's what I would say then back when I was 11, but my opinion's changed on it, and people do have solid points with their criticisms. So here are my only 2 nitpicks. How did Maz get Luke's lightsaber? That's not even explained here. But other than that, and the fact that the movie was, of course, similar to A New Hope, bit of a rehash, this movie is awesome. Okay, let me defend this movie. Again, people criticize saying it was too similar to New Hope, but there were some new and creative ideas. A stormtrooper betraying the First Order, a son killing his old man, and a creature battle on an actual ship freighter. Did A New Hope have any of that stuff? No. Now, the most talked about scene in this movie is Han Solo's death. One of the most emotional scenes in all Star Wars lore. I will say this though, when Han approached Kylo Ren, I was actually expecting him to die, and surprise, surprise, it happened. That's just what happens if you predict movies. Okay, now let's talk about Captain Phasma, the most underrated Star Wars character of all time in my opinion. This will sound controversial, but Captain Phasma gets the award of being my favorite villain in the whole Star Wars franchise. I'm not sure why, but she just is. People say that she's useless, when in reality she's not. She is partially the reason why Finn betrayed the First Order, after Finn realized what the First Order did, thanks to the way she trained him. And then, when Finn, Han, and Chewbacca infiltrate Starkiller Base, they capture her and force her to shut down the shields. So there, she does serve a purpose here. As for Rey, I just really like her thanks to Daisy Ridley's performance. She just steals the show for me, and it kind of wants me to just go and meet Daisy Ridley in person. As for Finn and Poe, they are technically fine here. I wish they were explored more. I mean, Finn is wasted in this entire sequel trilogy. We never learned anything about him. We got a little bit of Poe in Rise of Skywalker, but other than that, there's not really a lot of history with these characters. So overall, The Force Awakens, I love it to this day. It got me into Star Wars, but it's no longer at the top of this list. Okay, let's move on to number 4, and that is The Last Jedi. Now, I know this is going to make a lot of people angry and frustrated, but this is only my opinion, and I love this film because it takes the saga into a brand new direction. But if you don't like that, that's perfectly fine. Now, let me just talk about the only problem I have with The Last Jedi. I did not care for Poe Dameron in this movie. He acts like a disobedient rookie and doesn't listen to Leia or Holdo whatsoever until the very end. I just felt like that was against Poe's character and that he should already know better than to do that. But that's it. That's my only criticism of this movie. Now let's talk about the positives. Let's talk about Luke Skywalker first. Now, some people say that he's completely out of character in this movie, and I can understand why they would say that, but for me, I see it as more of an expansion of his character. And it makes total sense for him to be like this. When Snoke turned Ben Solo, his nephew, to the dark side, Luke thought about killing him, and it makes sense for him to be like that, because in Return of the Jedi, he had to succeed in a mission to get his father back on the light side. Here, however, he was so Obi-Wan-esque, where his apprentice and nephew, Ben Solo, soon to be Kylo Ren, was turned to the dark side, and he had never had an experience like that, so how is this any different from Obi-Wan's experience in Revenge of the Sith? Lastly, his death scene at the very end is very emotional, and it changes Rey's character a little bit. It makes her wiser, and it makes me look forward to The Rise of Skywalker after I watch this movie. So overall, I like what they did with Luke here. Now I will defend Rose Tico. While I wouldn't particularly call her a great character, I have to say that people have to give Kelly Marie Tran a break. So people bully this actress for her performance. Dudes, she's excellent here. With this being her first big movie debut, I really don't understand why people hate her so much. Give the woman a break. Imagine how happy she might have been when she learned that she got the role. Do you think that would be fair if you got a big role in a movie and she bullied you for your performance? Think about it. Okay, now Canto Bight. People say that the scene was completely useless, but again, I will defend it. I think my biggest offense about Canto Bight is DJ. If it wasn't for the scene, Finn and Rose would never have found him, and then he wouldn't have come with them only to betray them to the First Order. He is partially responsible for why almost all the Resistance was killed in this film, and that's my defense on Canto Bight. Now, I absolutely love Kylo Ren in this movie. Him struggling to decide to turn back to the light side or not, it's just awesome. Adam Driver's performance really works. I even love Rey in this movie. I love Rey as a whole, and I think this was where she was at her best, where she started to convince Ben that there is still good in him. She tried to get him back the first time and failed, but then in the next movie, she managed to get him to redeem himself. And finally, we have Supreme Leader Snoke. People also complain that we never learn who Snoke truly is. And again, this is also okay because it doesn't matter who Snoke is. Snoke will always remain this mysterious character who will never get a full origin story. The reason I like the fact that he died is that I didn't particularly care for Snoke's character whatsoever. I think Andy Serkis' his performance was amazing, but the reason I'm glad they killed him here is that I can't really see what he would have done in The Rise of Skywalker. So I'm glad that they killed him off in the middle of this trilogy. And That's basically how I defend The Last Jedi. I see it now as the standout film of the sequel trilogy. Okay, now we're in the home stretch here. The original trilogy. In third place is A New Hope, the one that started it all. Throughout this movie, you can tell that George Lucas really wanted this movie not to be flawed at all, and he did that very well here. But there are only two small nitpicks about this movie. One of them is when Luke finds Princess Leia in her cell, he tells her that he's with Ben Kenobi, and Leia asks, he is by saying, Ben Kenobi, where is he? How does she know that Ben is Obi-Wan Kenobi? Just how? And my other nitpick is that Luke at one point called R5D4 an R2 unit, but with it being the first movie, it was bound to be flawed, and that's why I've placed it above all the other movies that have a small nitpick. Now we can get into the positives. It is not hard to believe that this movie became iconic immediately, after all. I absolutely love everyone's performance here, especially Mark Hamill and Carrie Fisher, with it being their first big role in a movie. Of course, there are a lot of memorable quotes from this, such as, "Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my only hope. These aren't the droids you're looking for," and "I find your lack of faith disturbing," which all have had their own parodies, and they always make me laugh. As for the visuals of this movie, with it being from 1977, it looks really decent, especially if you watch it in the remastered edition. And I actually got the full screen VHS edition for Christmas this year, the original trilogy from 1997, which I'll show in another video. This movie also foreshadows The Force Awakens in some way. When Uncle Owen is looking for Luke on the moisture farm, he literally says, "Luke! Luke! Luke!" numerous times, foreshadowing The Force Awakens. See what I did there? It is also amazing to compare all the effects that were changed throughout the period of time. It's awesome to see the original Han shot first on the very first VHS tapes of Star Wars, and all the different types of explosions on both Alderaan and the Death Star. So New Hope, a great way to start this beloved franchise, and one of the best iconic films of all time. Now let's talk about the runner-up, and that is Return of the Jedi. Ah, yes, the final installment of the original trilogy, and in my opinion, the most underrated one out of the three. I will never understand why fans don't give this one that much attention. Anyway, let's talk about the things I love about this masterpiece of a conclusion. I love how the first half hour is spent on Tatooine with Luke and the others, and how they rescue Han Solo from Jabba's palace. And the battle over the Sarlacc pit was awesome and fun to watch. Seeing Boba Fett get digested, watching Leia strangle Jabba, and seeing Luke do his best stunts ever, it was awesome and a guilty pleasure to watch. Another nice aspect is finally seeing the Emperor in person for the first time. This was Ian McDiarmid's time to shine, and he managed to pull it off perfectly. Seeing him trying to convince Luke onto the dark side, watching him trying to execute Luke, it's just great. It's awesome. It's jaw-dropping. Of course, Luke and Leia revealing to be brother and sister is the most interesting thing in the film. I love it how at the end, after Death Star 2 is destroyed, Leia reveals to Han that Luke is her brother. It makes Han feel relieved that he's not fighting for her. And I love how George Lucas decided to have Han and Leia fully in love at the very end. As for the Ewoks, let's just say that they're cute, adorable, and it doesn't surprise me that they didn't just get one, but two movies to themselves. I absolutely love Wicket, and I think it's impressive that Warwick Davis was only 12 years old when he got the role. I also love Luke in this movie. I think it's great how he's portrayed here, how he tried his very best to get his father back on the light side and succeeded. This is basically Mark Hamill at his absolute best here. So yes, in my opinion, this is the perfect way to wrap up the original trilogy. Okay, time to reveal my number one. That is The Empire Strikes Back. I'm pretty sure that this was no surprise to anyone. Let me say something. The Force Awakens is what got me into Star Wars back in 2015, but in 2013, when I learned about the concept of Star Wars, I tried to sit through the entirety of Empire Strikes Back, but I only got halfway through it because at the halfway mark, I just got really bored and turned it off since it was a 2-hour movie, and I had never sat through a movie that long before, so I turned it off, but enjoyed what I had seen. Now let's talk about the things I absolutely love in this beloved masterpiece. I adore the relationship that Princess Leia and Han Solo have with each other. It can show you how much they have aged between A New Hope and this movie, and when Han Solo is encased in carbonite, there is the most famous line between them, "I love you, I know." That just shows you that they are just pretending to hate each other, when in reality, it was the exact opposite. Now we all love ourselves some Yoda. This is the movie. He is the reason why he is ultimately a fan favorite. This movie has his most famous quote, "Do or do not. There is no try." And every time I go into the clothes section of a store, there are always shirts saying this line. Now let's talk about Boba Fett, one of my favorite Star Wars characters. And by the way, go watch his spinoff. It's awesome. He is intimidating nonetheless. Only if you see him standing with a blaster in his hands, looking like he's minding his own business, you can still tell that he's serious. He is determined to deliver Han Solo to Jabba the Hutt, dead or alive, for his own money. Rest in peace, Jeremy Bullock. You were amazing as this character. As for Lando Calrissian, well, who doesn't love Lando, honestly? He also became a fan favorite because of this movie, and Solo saves the movie from flaws. In this case, it shows how Han and Lando met, which caused fans to stop wondering about how their relationship started. And so, we can all call this film a true masterpiece. Now let's talk about the Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker dynamic. Without a doubt, the most talked about Star Wars scene ever. I'm not saying that it's overrated, because it's not. It rightfully deserves to be talked about a lot. Vader telling Luke that he is his father gives chills through me every single time, despite the fact that Revenge of the Sith gives that away, and it's the first thing that just pops into not just mine, but everybody's head when they think about Empire Strikes Back. So now, I consider this the standout Star Wars film, just like about 99% of the Star Wars community. And that is it. That is my entire ranking of all 11 Star Wars movies. Attack of the Clones, Solo, The Rise of Skywalker, Revenge of the Sith, The Phantom Menace, Rogue One, The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, A New Hope, Return of the Jedi, and Empire Strikes Back. This movie series is great, and I'm going to sit through each one since I love Star Wars so much. These are my favorite movies of all time, and I highly recommend, if you're a Star Wars fan, you watch every single one of them in chronological order, starting with Phantom Menace to The Rise of Skywalker. And this was Lego Fan 65, aka Caleb's thanks of the Star Wars movies. This is just fun. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed it. And leave a comment on what would you rank these movies? Do you agree with my list, or do you have different opinions? This is me signing out, and goodbye.